The air in the grand concert hall was thick with excitement. People dressed in fancy clothes filled the beautiful room, waiting to hear the world-famous pianist, Victor Lang. He was known all over Europe as a genius. With silver-streaked hair and perfect posture, he had played in the greatest halls of Paris, London, and New York. That night in Vienna, he was performing at a charity event meant to raise money for music scholarships. Everyone who was someone in the city was their politicians, artists, business people, and rich socialites. Outside the main doors, the air was cold. Snowflakes floated gently through the air. Inside, the chandeliers sparkled like stars, and everything smelled like polished wood and expensive perfume. The staff moved quickly, checking lights, tuning instruments, and adjusting seats. Somewhere, near the back of the building, Maria, a quiet middle-aged cleaning woman, was finishing her shift. Her gray hair was tied back into a simple bun. Her hands were red from scrubbing floors. She wore an old wool coat and broken shoes that squeaked when she walked. Maria had been cleaning that building for years. She didn't speak much to anyone, and most people didn't notice her. She always did her work quietly and left without drawing attention. But tonight, something strange pulled her toward the concert hall. She had never been allowed inside the main room when famous people were performing, but tonight she was curious. As she walked past a side door, she heard the soft sound of the piano being tested. It made her stop. It sounded deep, soft, beautiful, touched something inside her without thinking. Maria pushed the side door slightly open. No one stopped her. The crowd hadn't filled the room yet. A few staff members were talking in the back, and Victor Lang was on stage checking the piano. She slipped in and stood in the shadows, her eyes wide as she looked at the stage. Piano shined under the lights like a black jewel. Victor tapped a few keys, adjusting his bench and flipping through sheet music. Then he stood and said something to the technician and stepped down from the stage. He noticed Maria standing there, looking almost frozen. He raised an eyebrow and, without recognizing her as part of the cleaning staff, gave a small, amused smile. "Do you want to try the piano?" he asked with a chuckle. His tone wasn't cruel, but he definitely wasn't serious. A few people around him laughed softly. To them, she looked like a poor woman who didn't even belong in the room. Alone on stage, Maria looked nervous. Her heart was beating fast. She looked around, thinking maybe he wasn't talking to her. But he was. The crowd was small at this point, just some early guests and organizers, so it wasn't a big scene. But there was something in Maria's heart that didn't want to walk away. She took a deep breath and gave a small nod. Victor's smile grew. He stepped aside and made a show of offering her the stage like a royal joke. One or two guests clapped in mock encouragement. Maria walked up slowly. Her shoes made soft squeaks against the polished wood. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her eyes were calm. As she sat down at the piano, some people chuckled again. Victor folded his arms and watched, expecting a few wrong notes and maybe a funny moment, but as soon as her fingers touched the keys, the room began to change. The first note was soft, like a whisper. Then came another, and another, and then a full phrase melody that sounded like it had come from someone's soul. The laughter stopped. Heads turned. Even Victor's face changed. Maria's hands moved across the keys with a gentle but confident grace. She played not to show off, but as if she were remembering something, an old feeling, a lost love, forgotten dream. The room became completely silent except for the piano. The simple woman who had just been a cleaner a few minutes ago was now controlling the attention of every person in that grand hall. Her eyes were closed, and her fingers danced like they belonged to someone much younger, someone with years of training. The music rose and fell, touching soft places in people's hearts that even they had forgotten existed. When she finished, the last note hung in the air like a feather falling. Then came silence. No one clapped right away. They were too stunned. Victor's arms had dropped to his sides. His jaw was slightly open. For a moment, he looked as if he had seen a ghost. Maria stood quietly and gave a small bow as if she was just sorry for taking up everyone's time. Then she stepped down from the stage. Suddenly, someone began to clap, then another, and then the whole room exploded in applause. People stood up, some even wiped away tears. A few rushed to get closer, asking who she was. But Maria didn't wait. She walked quietly toward the side door again, her cheeks red with embarrassment. She didn't know how to handle attention like that. Backstage, the staff was whispering. Someone recorded her performance on their phone. A young journalist in the room had streamed it live to social media. Comments were already flooding in. Who is she? I'm crying just listening. She plays better than anyone I've ever heard. That's not just talent, it's soul. Maria, meanwhile, was back in the hallway, picking up her cleaning cart. Her heart was still racing. She didn't know what she had just done. She had only played what she remembered from long ago, from a life she had buried deep inside. She hadn't touched a grand piano like that in years. Last time she had played in front of people, she was a young girl full of dreams. But life had crushed those dreams with loss, struggle, and loneliness. Never thought she would play again, not like this. Not in front of the world. Inside the concert hall, Victor sat down slowly. He rubbed his hands together, not from cold, but from confusion. He had made a joke. But the joke had turned into something serious, something powerful. He had seen thousands of pianists in his life, many trained by the best teachers in the world. But this woman, this cleaning lady, had something none of them had. Heart. It wasn't just her skill that shocked him. It was the way her music told a story without words. It was honest, pure, and filled with feeling. People were still buzzing around, asking questions. Some of the guests wanted to leave, not because they were bored, but because nothing else that night could compare. How could Victor follow that act? How could anything top what they had just witnessed? A staff member approached him and said, "Do you know her?" He shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered, "but I want to." That night, Maria's quiet walk through the side door changed everything. A woman who had spent years cleaning, up after others had just stolen the spotlight without even trying. As the snow continued to fall outside, the world inside the concert hall had started to turn in a new direction. A direction that would bring the past and the present together. In a way no one could have expected, and all because one man told a woman to play. As a joke, the sound of Maria's last piano note still hung in the air like a soft goodbye. As she stood up from the bench and stepped down from the stage, the entire room was frozen in silence. People didn't know what to say. What they had just witnessed was not part of the show. It wasn't rehearsed or announced. It had happened suddenly, like magic. A woman they had all ignored or laughed at had played music that touched something deep inside their hearts. Slowly clapping began one person. At first, then another, and then the whole room joined in. Applause echoed through the hall like thunder, but Maria didn't wait for it. She kept walking slowly, her head down, her hands still shaking a little. Backstage, she picked up her old cleaning cart. She had only played for a few minutes, but it felt like she had just returned from a place she hadn't visited in years. Memories rushed through her, memories of her childhood, of old pianos, music teachers, and dreams that were buried long ago. She tried to leave the building quickly, afraid that someone might stop her, ask questions, or laugh again. She didn't. Want attention? She just wanted to go home. But the concert hall wasn't ready to forget her. The video that had been recorded was already making its way across the internet. A young man in the audience, a junior music journalist named Lucas, had been live streaming when Maria began to play. He hadn't stopped recording. He had captured the entire performance, and he had already posted it with the caption, "Cleaner woman stuns, famous pianist with masterpiece performance." Within 30 minutes, the video had reached hundreds of views. Within an hour, it was climbing into the thousands. Back inside the hall, Victor Lang stood near the stage. People around him were still talking about what had happened. Some praised the woman's courage. Others wondered if it was a setup. How could a cleaning woman play like that? Victor didn't say much. His face was calm, but his mind was racing. He remembered how he had called her up as a joke, how he had expected to be entertained by her awkwardness, but instead he had been humbled. He walked over to the piano and touched the keys. The warmth of her music still seemed to live there. He sat down and tried to play, but it didn't feel the same. The piano sounded colder now, like it was missing something. that something had come from Maria. He turned to one of the organizers. "Who is she?" he asked. The organizer shrugged. "She's one of the cleaners, I think. I've seen her around, but I don't know her name." Victor nodded slowly. For the rest of the night, the concert continued, but people's hearts were no longer with the performance. They had already experienced the real moment of the evening, and nothing else could match it. Even Victor's usual charm and powerful playing felt pale in comparison. He finished his set, took his bows, and left the stage quickly. The next morning, Maria sat in her small apartment on the edge of the city. Her home was simple: old furniture, a cracked window, a small kitchen with peeling wallpaper. In the corner of her living room stood a dusty, upright piano. It was old and missing a few keys, but it was her most valuable possession. She had bought it years ago from a second-hand shop when she was still holding on to hope. It was the only thing in her life that made her feel whole. Maria made a cup of tea and sat near the piano. Her phone, which was rarely used except for work calls, began buzzing. At first, she ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. She finally picked it up. There were dozens of notifications, missed calls, messages, and strange names, asking, "Are you the lady from the concert?" She didn't understand what was happening until one of her neighbors knocked on the door with a phone in hand. "You're famous," the neighbor said, holding up a video of Maria playing on stage. Maria's eyes widened. She sat down slowly. As the video played, her hands trembled. She had no idea someone had recorded her. She watched herself walk to the piano, sit down, and start playing. She saw her fingers move across the keys like a different person had taken over her body. And then she saw the crowd's reaction. People clapping, some crying, Victor staring. At her in shock, she felt overwhelmed. She wanted to cry, to laugh, to hide. She had never wanted fame. She had only wanted to feel music again. That same morning, Victor Lang made several phone calls. He asked his agent, his assistant, and even the concert hall's manager to help him find the woman who had played the piano. "I need to speak with her," he said again and again. But no one had her full name. The only clue came from the janitorial company that managed the cleaning staff. After hours of calling, Victor finally got a name: Maria Keller. Lucas. The young journalist who had posted the video was also trying to find Maria. He wanted to write a full article about her. His editor had called him excitedly, saying this: "Woman is all over the internet. Find her before someone else does." Lucas started contacting cleaning companies, asking around in music forums, and digging into old music records. He felt there was a story hiding behind her hands, a story people would want to know. By the second day, the video had crossed 1 million views. Famous musicians began sharing it. One caption read, "This woman plays like the music lives inside." Her, a famous composer, tweeted, "Who is she? She just reminded us all why we fell in love with music in the first place." Maria, meanwhile, was hiding. She didn't leave her house. She was scared. All the attention made her feel like she had done something wrong. She didn't understand the internet, and she didn't know if people were laughing at her or truly impressed. The last time she had performed publicly, she was a teenager. Back then, she was known as a musical prodigy. But life had changed everything. When she was just 17, she had received a full scholarship to a music academy. People believed she would one day become a concert pianist. But her mother became very ill, and Maria had to leave school to care for her. After her mother died, her younger brother was in trouble with the law. She worked many jobs to support him. Years passed. Music became something distant, like a forgotten dream, and eventually she gave up. The only time she played was late. At night, alone, when no one could hear. But now, the world had heard her again. On the third day after the concert, Victor finally found her apartment. He didn't come with cameras or assistants. He stood outside her building with a scarf around his neck and a look of deep thought on his face. When Maria opened the door and saw him, she was shocked. You're the pianist," she said. Quietly. "And you," Victor replied with a gentle smile, "are the real one." He stepped inside after she invited him in. They sat together in her small living room. He looked at the old piano in the corner and smiled. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I invited you to the stage as a joke, but it turns out you were." The one who gave the audience something real? Maria looked down. I didn't mean to embarrass you. You didn't, he said. You inspired me, and many others. Is that video of you playing? It's gone viral, Maria sighed. I never asked for that. I know, Victor said, but maybe this is your second chance. She didn't answer at first. Her fingers touched the edge of the piano. I don't know if I can do this. Again, I'm not young. I've been away from this world for so long. But your music is still inside you, he said. And the world is listening now. For a long moment, they sat in silence. The old piano stood quietly beside them, like an old friend waiting to be remembered. Then Victor asked, would you consider playing again? With me this time. Not as a joke, but as a duet. As equals. Maria looked at him. Her eyes were unsure, but something in her heart stirred. A spark that had nearly died out was coming back to life. She didn't say yes right away, but for the first time in many years, she didn't say no either. And in that moment, two pianists, one forgotten, sat together, knowing something special had begun. It's not just for them, but for everyone who still believed in the power of true music and the beauty of second chances. For the next few days, the whole city couldn't stop talking about the woman who had stunned a concert hall full of rich and powerful people. Videos of Maria's piano performance were everywhere on news channels, on social media, and even in newspapers. People in coffee shops and offices whispered, "Did you see that cleaning woman who played like a genius?" Many didn't know her name, but her face was becoming familiar. In the video, she looked shy and simple, dressed in old clothes. Yet, when she sat at the piano, she looked like she belonged there, like it was her true home. More and more people started asking, who is she? Where did she come from? How could someone like her play better than world-famous musicians? A group of music students at a university began watching her video over and over, trying to copy her technique. They were amazed by how natural and emotional her playing was. One of them said, "She's not just playing notes, she's telling a story." Another replied, "It's like her fingers are speaking a language we forgot." Lucas, the young journalist who had first posted the video, decided to investigate. He wanted to find out who Maria really was. He went to the cleaning company where she worked, asked her coworkers, and even visited her neighborhood. Finally, he found someone who knew about her past. An old man who ran a second-hand music shop remembered her. He told Lucas Maria Keller was once a star, a real talent. She had the gift. But then she disappeared. Lucas became even more curious. He searched old music school records and found her name listed among top students in a famous music academy 25 years ago. She had received awards and scholarships. One record showed that she had played in youth concerts across Europe when she was just a teenager. But suddenly, the record stopped. There was no explanation, no scandal, no injury, nothing. She had simply vanished from the music world. This mystery made the public even more fascinated. News reporters started calling her the lost pianist. TV programs ran stories with dramatic titles like, "She was meant to be a star." Then life happened. Some people guessed she had been rejected or failed. Others thought she had given up. But no one really knew what had happened, except Maria, at her small home. Maria sat quietly watching the world go crazy over her name. It felt strange. She had lived in silence for so many years, hiding her story, her past, and most of all, her music. Now strangers were talking about her as if she were a legend. Some people sent flowers, others sent letters. One little girl even drew a picture of Maria at the piano and left it at the cleaning company's front desk with a note, "You are my hero." Despite the love and admiration, Maria didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who had failed. A long time ago, memories of her younger days came flooding back, days full of hope, talent, and hard work. She remembered her old music teacher, a kind man who had told her she was born to play. She remembered practicing for hours every day, even when her fingers were sore. She remembered performing on big stages as a teenager while people clapped and cheered. But she also remembered the day her mother fell sick. Everything changed after that. She had to quit school, stop performing, and take care of her family. Then came job after job working in stores, cleaning houses, and doing whatever she could to survive. Music became something private, a hidden treasure she only shared with the walls of her small apartment. She would play at night, softly, so the neighbors wouldn't complain. The world had moved on, and she had been left behind. Now that forgotten world was knocking on her door again. One morning, Victor Lang arrived at her house once more. He had spent days thinking about her. As a man who had spent his life performing and teaching music, he couldn't stop thinking about the depth in Maria's playing. He had seen many skilled pianists in his life, but she was different. She played like someone who had felt both pain and joy deeply. And he wanted the world to hear her again, this time, properly. He brought a proposal with him. He wanted her to perform with him on stage in a special concert. Not as a guest, not as a surprise, but as an equal. "We can call it the return of Maria Keller," he said gently. "Let people hear what they've been missing all these years." Maria looked at him with uncertain eyes. "I'm not ready," she said. "I haven't performed like that in years." "You're more ready than most professionals," Victor replied. "I've seen them play with their hands, but you play with your soul?" She smiled softly but shook her head. "I'm not like you. I don't belong in that world anymore." Victor didn't argue. He left her with the invitation and said, "Think about it. If you say yes, the stage is yours." After he left, Maria sat at her piano for hours. Her fingers moved over the keys, remembering the old pieces she used to love. Her hands still remembered everything, even though her heart was unsure. That night she played until the sun rose, tears rolling down her cheeks as she felt music come alive again inside her. The next day her neighbors knocked on her door. One by one, they came to encourage her. The woman upstairs, the old man next door, even the teenagers who usually played loud music in the street, they all said the same thing: you must go. You have to show the world your gift. Finally, Maria picked up the phone and called Victor. She spoke quietly. "If the offer is still open, I will play." Victor smiled on the other end of the line. "Welcome back," he said. News spread quickly. The famous pianist Victor Lang would be performing a duet with Maria Keller, the woman who had shocked the world with her surprise performance. The concert was scheduled for 2 weeks later, and tickets sold out in less than an hour. Music lovers from all over Europe wanted to witness it. People were calling it the most anticipated concert of the year. Maria didn't care about the fame or the crowd. She just wanted to play once more properly, this time with no fear, no shame, and nothing to hide. In those 2 weeks, she practiced day and night. Victor visited often, and they rehearsed together. He treated her with deep respect, never speaking to her like a beginner or a forgotten artist. He listened carefully when she played, even asking her for advice on some pieces. They laughed, shared stories, and found that their love for music had the same roots, even if their lives had gone in different directions. During one rehearsal, Victor asked her, "Do you ever regret walking away from music?" Maria looked down. "Every single day. But I had no choice. Life took me in another direction." He nodded slowly. "Well, life has brought you back now, and I think it was always waiting for you." The night of the concert arrived. Concert hall was packed. Every seat was filled, and hundreds more watched on live stream. The stage was beautifully decorated. A grand piano sat at the center, shining under the lights. Backstage, Maria stood in a long, simple black dress. Her hair was neatly tied, and her hands trembled slightly. She looked in the mirror and whispered to herself, "You can do this?" Victor stood beside her, smiling gently. "Are you ready?" Maria nodded. As they walked onto the stage, the audience clapped loudly. Cameras flashed. But Maria didn't focus on them. She focused on the piano. When she sat down, her hands touched the keys like they were old friends. She took a deep breath, and the music began. Together, she and Victor played. With perfect harmony, their hands moved in a beautiful dance, their sounds weaving together like two voices in one song. The crowd sat in complete silence, listening to every note. And when it ended, the entire hall rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous. People were cheering, crying, shouting her name. But Maria just smiled softly. She had done what she came to do. In that moment, She wasn't just a cleaning woman or a forgotten talent or a mystery. She was Maria Keller, the pianist, who had once been lost, but had now been found. As the final notes of the concert echoed through the hall, Maria sat frozen at the piano bench. Her heart was beating so loudly in her chest that she could hardly hear the thunder of applause coming from the crowd. Victor Lang, sitting beside her, gently touched her arm and smiled. As she looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. The audience stood clapping, cheering, and some even shouting her name. Flashlights sparkled like stars all around. Cameras captured every angle, and people stood on their toes to get one last look at the woman who had just performed the most unforgettable piece of the night. Maria stood slowly, holding her hands together nervously. She gave a small bow, shy and unsure. Victor stepped forward and took her hand, raising it in the air like she had just won a great victory. The crowd grew louder. Maria couldn't believe it. People were clapping for her, calling her name, honoring her as if she had always been a star. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. Not for the mop she used or the cleaning cart she pushed, but for the music inside her heart. Backstage, organizers rushed to congratulate her. They shook her hand, hugged her, and asked for photos. Maria didn't know how to react. She had spent years in silence, unnoticed, and now, suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to her. Her simple dress and plain hairstyle didn't matter. People saw something far more beautiful in her the way she had poured her soul into the music. After the show, Victor led her to the green room, where he poured her a glass of water. "You were brilliant," he said. "I knew you had something special. But tonight, you reminded us why music even exists." Maria looked down, smiling softly. "I was afraid," she admitted. "That's what made it real," Victor said. "Music without fear is just sound. You gave it meaning." Porters waited outside, hoping to get a few words from her. One of them asked, "Maria, where have you been all these years?" Another shouted, "Why didn't you become a professional pianist?" She didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to answering questions about herself. But Victor stepped in and said gently, "Let's give her some space. She gave us her music. That's enough for tonight." As they walked outside into the cold night air, Maria looked up at the sky. It was clear, with stars shining like tiny lights above the city. She took a deep breath. She felt light, free, like the music had removed the weight of all the years she had carried in silence. Victor's car was waiting, but Maria asked if she could walk home. She needed to feel the ground beneath her feet, to remind herself that this moment was real. When she reached her small apartment, her neighbors were waiting. They clapped and cheered when they saw her. Some had watched the concert online, others had heard about it from friends. The little girl upstairs ran down and hugged her, saying, "I saw you on TV. You look like a queen." Maria laughed and hugged her back. Her hands were still trembling, not from nerves, but from the energy that was still flowing through her body. Inside her apartment, everything looked the same, quiet, simple, and peaceful. But something inside her had changed. Maria, the cleaner, anymore? She had become Maria the pianist again, the woman she used to be, the woman she had always been in her heart. The next morning, Maria woke up early. She thought the attention might fade overnight, but it hadn't. Her phone had dozens of missed calls and messages. Newspapers had printed her picture on the front page with headlines like, "The cleaning lady who played like a goddess in Maria Keller, the heart behind the piano." People were sharing her story all over the world. Strangers sent her emails thanking her for reminding them that it's never too late to follow your dreams. One message read, "You made me cry, not just because of the music, but because you made me believe in myself again." Victor called her and said, "You've started something, Maria. People want to know more. They want to hear you play again." Maria was overwhelmed. "I don't know if I can do this again and again," she said. "I only wanted to play once." "But you've opened a door," Victor said gently. "You have the chance to do what you were always meant to do." He wasn't the only one. Music schools invited her to speak. Orchestra directors offered her chances to play. Even a famous music magazine asked to do a cover story on her. But Maria didn't say yes, right away. She needed time. She wasn't chasing fame. She just wanted to understand what her music meant, no, not for others, but for herself. She went back to her job at the cleaning company. Her coworkers welcomed her like a hero. They hugged her, clapped for her, and brought her sweets and flowers. Her boss said, "You don't need to work here anymore. You're a star now." But Maria said kindly, "Music is in my soul, but this job gave me peace when I had nothing. I'll decide when I'm ready to leave." 8. A few days later, Victor invited her to a dinner with some fellow musicians. They sat in a quiet restaurant, sharing stories of their careers, their struggles, and their love for music. Some of them had watched Maria's video many times. One woman, a violinist, told her, "You reminded me why I started playing in the first place." "Thank you." Maria smiled, but remained humble. She never saw herself as someone great. She saw herself as someone lucky to get a second chance. After dinner, Victor walked her home. "Maria," he said, "I want you to join me for a world tour. We'll play in different cities together. It's just a few concerts, to share your gift with more people." Maria paused. "It's a big step." "Yes," Victor nodded. "I'll be beside you. The piano will be your voice. Your story will be your strength." That night, Maria sat alone at her piano. She played softly, letting her fingers move freely. She wasn't thinking about fame or the crowd. She played because she needed to. She played for her mother, who had given up so much. She played for her younger self, who had once dreamed of concert stages. She played for the quiet years, when music was her only friend. And when she finished, she knew the answer. She called Victor and said, "Yes, let's play for the world." In the following weeks, rehearsals began again. Posters of their upcoming shows appeared in cities across Europe: London, Paris, Rome, and Berlin. They called it the Unexpected Harmony Tour. People were excited not just to hear beautiful music, but to witness the story of a woman who came from silence and found her voice again. Each performance was magical. Maria's playing grew stronger, more confident, but it never lost the emotional touch that made it special. Audiences cried, clapped, and gave her standing ovations everywhere. Journalists followed her, but she stayed humble. She wore simple clothes, spoke softly in interviews, and always thanked Victor for believing in her. During one concert, after the final piece, the lights dimmed, and Victor stood alone on stage, said to the audience, "Tonight, I didn't just play with a pianist, I played with a soul that sings through her fingers."
Ow.
Maria Keller reminded me, and all of us, that true music doesn't need big names or awards. It needs honesty, and she gave us that. Maria walked out to join him. The crowd rose to their feet, cheering louder than ever. In that moment, she realized she had not only found her dream again, she had inspired thousands of others to believe. And theirs, after the tour, Maria didn't return to cleaning. She didn't need to. She didn't move into a mansion or buy expensive things either. She used her earnings to open a small music center in her neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of love. She offered free piano lessons to children from poor families, saying, "Talent is not born in rich houses, it lives in every heart waiting to be heard." Parents brought their kids, hoping they'd be taught by the woman who had moved the world with her hands. She didn't teach them to be famous, she taught them to feel the music. "Don't play to impress," she would say. "Play to express." Maria's story became part of music history, not because of her fame, but because of her truth. She had been forgotten by the world, but not by the piano. When the world finally heard her, it listened with open hearts. Years later, when people told stories about great musicians, they didn't just speak of Victor Lang or the grand halls of Vienna. They spoke of a woman with rough hands and a quiet soul who sat at a piano one evening and changed. Laugh, and she dared to play. The morning sun rose slowly over the city, spreading golden light across rooftops and windows. Inside a quiet corner of the town, Maria Keller opened the curtains of her small apartment and looked outside. Life had changed so much for her, yet she still lived simply. The woman who once worked silently as a cleaner had now become known in many parts of the world as the sole pianist, a title given to her by music lovers who were touched by her story and her talent. But even with all the fame, Maria had stayed the same, humble, gentle, and kind. After the tour with Victor Lang ended, Maria had returned home. She didn't want to be a star. She only wanted to continue sharing the gift that life had buried deep inside her heart for many years. She didn't buy an expensive house or live a fancy life. She kept her small apartment where the old piano still stood in the corner. It was the same piano she had played every night when the world didn't know her name. It had been her friend, in silence. And now it was her friend in the light. Maria used the money she had earned from the concerts, not for herself, but for others. She opened a small music school in her neighborhood. It wasn't big or modern, but it had warmth. The floors were wooden, the walls painted soft colors. There were posters of great musicians, some known and some unknown, hanging beside photos of her students. The school had one goal: to give children from poor families a chance to learn music. No child was turned away. Someone had passion and curiosity. Maria welcomed them. Word about the school spread quickly. Parents who had once thought music was only for the rich now brought their children with hope. Some came in worn shoes, some with shy faces, but they all came with a sparkle in their eyes. Maria greeted them like family. She didn't care about their clothes or their background. She cared only about their hearts and their fingers. They could feel the music she knew she could teach them. One little boy, Omar, was only 8 years old when he arrived. He had never touched a piano before, but the moment Maria let him try, she saw something special. His hands were small, but his touch was gentle. He listened carefully, and when he played even a single note, it was full of emotion. Maria smiled and said, "You don't need expensive fingers. You need a listening heart." From that day, she became his guide. Every day, Maria would arrive early to the school and prepare the instruments. She cleaned the pianos herself, dusted the shelves, and made sure every child had a notebook and a pencil. Sometimes, she cooked small meals for children who came hungry. She remembered how difficult life had been for her, and she didn't want her students to face the same pain. She knew that hunger could silence dreams, and she wasn't going to let that happen under her roof. The students loved her. They called her Madame Maria, and some even called her Mama Music. She laughed with them, cried with them, and played beside them. Sometimes during breaks, she would sit at the piano and let her fingers fly across the keys. The students would gather around, watching in silence, amazed by the way she made the piano sing. It wasn't just playing, it was like storytelling through sound. After she finished, she always turned to them and said, "Now, your turn. Tell me your story." Outside the school, Maria's name continued to grow. Music magazines wrote about her journey. She received invitations to speak at universities and music academies. Some offered her awards. Others wanted to make documentaries. One filmmaker even wanted to make a movie about her life. But Maria politely said no to most of them. She didn't want to be turned into a character. She wanted to remain real. Only thing she agreed to was a short video made by a former student, showing the work being done at her school and the joy on the children's faces. Victor Lang continued to visit her often. Even after the tour, he remained her friend and supporter. Sometimes they played duets again, either in private or at small charity concerts. He would say, "You bring the heart, I'll bring the hands." They made a great team, not because of fame or technique, but because of trust. They respected each other deeply. Victor often told his students, "I've played in the biggest halls of the world, but the greatest lesson I ever learned was from a woman who used to clean those halls." One day, a letter arrived at Maria's school from the head of the National Music Council. He wanted to award her the Heart of Music Medal, an honor given only to those who had made a deep impact on the world of music. At first, Maria hesitated. She didn't like attention, but when her students begged her to accept it, she agreed. The ceremony was held in a beautiful hall, filled with musicians, teachers, and students. Maria wore a simple dress and stood nervously on the stage. When her name was called, the audience stood and clapped. She accepted the medal quietly, and when asked to speak, she stepped forward slowly. "I don't know many big words," she said softly. "I only know that music saved me when nothing else could, and now I want to help it save others. Thank you for listening to the music that lived in me, even when the world didn't hear it." The crowd stood again, many with tears in their eyes. Maria's story continued to spread, not because of marketing or headlines, but because of hearts. People shared her story at dinner tables, in classrooms, and in music halls. She became a symbol of hope for those who felt forgotten. One teacher in a village told her students, "Remember Maria Keller. She proves that your dream is never too late. It's only waiting for you to open the door." Years passed, but Maria remained the same. She still walked to the school every day, still helped clean the floors, and still smiled when her students hit the wrong keys. "Every wrong note is just a step toward the right one," she would say. And when her students played well, she didn't clap loudly. She just nodded and said, "Now, play it again. But this time, mean it." One evening, as the sun was setting and the school was quiet, Maria sat at her piano alone. The room was filled with soft orange light. She closed her eyes and began to play. The melody was gentle, like a lullaby for the world. She played not for a crowd, not for a camera, but for herself, for the little girl she once was, for the woman she became, and for the music that had always lived inside her. And as the last note faded into silence, Maria smiled. She didn't need applause anymore. She had found something far greater than fame. She had found peace. The world would always remember the day when a famous pianist jokingly asked a quiet woman to play. But what happened next became more than a surprise. It became a lesson that talent has no uniform, that greatness can hide in the most ordinary places, and that sometimes the music we need the most comes from the person we notice the least. Maria Keller didn't just play the piano. She changed lives with it. And somewhere in the back of a classroom, a young child placed their hands on the keys, whispered, "This is for Madame Maria," and began to play.